Thank you. I grew up in Ventura County here in California, and after high school I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a number of odd jobs going through high school, everything from driving a forklift, a janitor, a shorter cook. I had all these different jobs, and finally in 1989 a friend of mine gave me a camera, and I was going down to Peru, where my mom is from, and my cousin who's here tonight. And I was going down to Lima to visit my family down there, and he gave me a camera and said, look, go down there, make some pictures, see what you think. So when I got to Lima at that time in 1989, the country was in the depths of a civil war. The currency had the value of confetti. The place was in free fall. It was total chaos, and I was just completely stimulated. I was just like, this is incredible, because I grew up in, this sort of bucolic suburb of LA where everything was neat and tidy and boring. And I got to Lima and it just rearranged my molecules. So I just fell in love, deeply in love with Peru. I was totally seduced by the place and kept doing repeat trips, and I really got into photography. Told my mom, I think I really like photography. She said, oh my God, at last he's found something. Yes, photography is great, you're gonna love it. So I went to Brooks for a year, couldn't afford it, ended up at San Francisco State, which in the early 90s was a fantastic place to be, before the whole tech thing happened, and the city still had a lot of soul going on. And it just led to the AP, where I was in Mexico and Central America, then the Boston Globe and the Post, and finally back home here to the LA Times. So the trajectory that I took to get where I am now no longer exists for young photographers. It really can't be done that way anymore. I dug into a story about the drought in Central California, in the Central Valley. I mean, we're all enduring the drought, and it's just going to be worse this year. But a reporter, Diana Markham, and I wanted to dig into stories about how people are being affected. Once you go over the grapevine and drop into that valley, it's another country, and it's fascinating. It's just this remarkable place. And no one ever goes there, no one ever visits, it's never on the tourism radar, and it is spectacular. I mean, the people you meet, the communities that are there, the Azor community and the Hmong community, and certainly the migrant laborers that go through there, the music that emanated from there. I mean, California country, Merle Haggard and Buck Owens, and the history, it's really rich. And I was really happy to tap into that photographically. And we didn't want this to be about the politics, about the science, because we have reporters in Sacramento doing that, and we have reporters in LA doing all the environmental ramifications as a result of the drought. We just want it to be like, who are the people who haven't had water in 3 months? Who's the farmer about to lose everything? Who are the migrant workers that can no longer live in this city but have to move on to the next town or return home, return to Mexico because they just simply can't work anymore? The gentleman that you saw with the hat that's in the field picking, he has been here for 60 years, and he thinks he may have to go back to Mexico because there's no more work in Huron. And with the Sierra Nevada the way it is right now, I was just up there a few days ago in Sequoia, and there's no snow. I mean, none. Just way up on the peaks, and it looks like what it should in late June, early July. And they're not going to plant. I mean, they were still planting when we did this story. Now they may not plant at all, and that means nothing, like no work. After we ran these stories, because it was a series of 5 stories that ran throughout the year, and for instance, one gentleman in Stratford, he was the focus of the story because his business was ready to fold. He had stacks of IOUs because no one could pay him. And he got something like readers started calling in and donated. I think he made got $1,800 to pay off the IOUs, or $2,000 to pay off all those IOUs. And then he also got a bunch of other money. Donna Johnson, the woman who was delivering the water to the emaciated woman, to those sisters, she became something of a little media superstar, like 60 Minutes. A bunch of people ended up going and doing stories about her. But she got massive donations. And I was just there recently with a high school group that I was mentoring, and we went to Porterville, and they have a huge command center set up now. There's showers, there's all kinds of things. The gentleman that you saw, he was kind of on the floor looking very depressed, and there was a woman that was standing over him. He received all kinds of money so he could stay in his home. So that's like the stuff that really makes it worthwhile. That's the payoff, where you're really happy that it's direct action from the community, seeing these stories. And Americans have a lot of faults, but they are extremely charitable and giving. And I've had this experience, not often enough, but I've had it before, where we run stories and the outpouring of support is unbelievable, and it's great, and it makes you feel really great. So we set out to find people just affected. So it was a matter of going to towns like Huron, Stratford, East Porterville, and asking around. So you go into the cafes, into the coffee shops, you go into Stratford and go to the tractor salesman, like, hey, how's business? Who do you know that's being affected? One thing leads to another. Some of it's just serendipitous. You're in the right place at the right time in some diner, and a person walks in, I got a story for you, and they just start going on, and you're like, you're right, you do. This is an amazing story. And it just takes time on the ground on a story like this, because it's very slow moving. And I was really fortunate. I mean, the Central Valley was very good to me in terms of photography, in terms of being able to capture the story in a relatively short period of time. It was a story that was born out of a news event. It wasn't something that I pitched. The surge in immigration of women and children that were coming over in the spring from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, mainly Guatemala and Honduras, that were coming through Mexico and up through the border in Texas. But it was born out of the fact that there was a sudden surge, and we felt compelled that we really had to cover this story. This was a really important story to get into. Things have changed a lot in regards to immigration. It became a very kind of hot button issue in Washington as a result of this surge. Mexico, which in the past has never really stopped Central American migrants from passing through the country itself, going from south to north, they started to crack down on La Bestia, which is the freight train, the notorious freight train that the immigrants ride through the southern two-thirds of the country of Mexico. And it's incredibly dangerous. Gang activity, they're extorted. If they don't pay up, they're thrown off the train. Lots of really bad injuries. So now it's almost impossible for them to kind of go through. So many of them are walking hundreds of kilometers to avoid the train because they can't get on the train. So now they're walking these vast distances across Chiapas, across Oaxaca, and into Veracruz. And of course, Veracruz, Tamaulipas, these states in Mexico are dominated by the cartels, mainly the Zetas, which are perhaps the most dangerous of all these gangs that are roaming around down there. And human trafficking has become as lucrative as drug trafficking for them. So they're put at incredible risk. Earlier in the piece, you saw some pictures from a garbage dump. That's in Tapachula, and many Guatemalans, actually the entire dump is operated by Guatemalans. That they go in there, and many of them were thinking, oh, we're going to go to El Norte, we're going to cross through Mexico and get up, and they never made it. They fell into the hands of these syndicates that operate the garbage dump and pay them $2 a day, and they do all this work for incredible amount of hours in horrendous conditions, and they just get stuck there. They get stuck in this cycle that they can't break out of. They can't get back home because there's nothing for them really to go back to, because they come from the poorest districts of the mountains of Guatemala, and they can't get to the north because they don't make enough money to pay the passage to the coyotes and the other people that would get them across. And they are obvious targets within Mexico because they're obviously Guatemalan. Many of them, their Spanish is not really that great. They speak indigenous tongues. So it was a very sad situation. But logistically, for me to be down there, I mean, it really wasn't that. I rode La Bestia for a very short period of time outside Arriaga. I didn't do like a full run because that's just so dangerous. And if you have your cameras, you'll get off without your cameras, and they'll be gone. But I just rode it for a little bit outside of Arriaga. And one of the most frustrating moments in the opening picture, you saw that there was this raft, and there was a dog on the raft, and they're getting on. This is the Rio Suchiate, the Guatemalan and Mexican border, going into Chiapas. And they are crossing illegally right underneath the bridge that formally joins the two countries. So the immigration officials are on both sides, the police are on both sides, just kind of like, oh, ¿qué tal, compadre? Todo bien? Just start crossing. Everyone's just crossing. Contraband people with no problem. The authorities don't care on either side of the border. The Guatemalans go into Mexico to buy things because of the currency exchange and bring it back. So the Mexican authorities are like, let them do that. And the Guatemalan authorities are like, this is great because we'll get kickbacks on the other side when they bring the contraband across. And one time I thought I was going to get in trouble, and I was photographing people down below this bridge in El Carmen. And this Guatemalan policewoman, she came down and she was giving me the evil eye. She's just like, who is this guy? He's taking pictures. I'm like, okay, here it comes. And she comes down and she was giving me the evil eye, and one of the guys that lives there in the town comes over and is like, you know why she's mad at you? And I'm just like, well, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm taking pictures. It's like, no, because she can't extort these immigrants while you're here. She can't get money from them while you're here. Yeah, so the immigrants, they're just kind of like, oh, hey, man, well, you can stay here as long as you want. This is great. So I was able to hang out for a little while and make the pictures, and she was getting increasingly upset with me. And then I had coyotes throw rocks at me and stuff like that, like don't take my picture, don't do this and stuff. And so it was like problematic in that sense. It wasn't that hard to shoot it. Texas was more difficult because you're dealing with federal authorities and no access, and you had to wait long periods of time for anything to happen. So, I mean, I was out with the Border Patrol, and you saw a picture with a helicopter kind of flying over in the sugarcane field. I mean, I waited like 3 days to get that picture. We have a great reporter based in Houston, Molly Hennessy Fisk, and she was really able to help. If it were just me doing it, I would have added a week or two to the trip. But she knew people already, so she was really able to help. And that's when working for the LA Times has a tremendous advantage. I know there's the concerned photographer thing, like, you know, my photos can change the world and blah, 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 and all that kind of thing. That is extremely rare, if not impossible in this day and age, when it was just, we're under such a deluge of imagery from iPhones and Instagram. No, I know what you're saying. So when I'm doing this, I have an advantage. I work for the Los Angeles Times, which is still a powerful newspaper. It has a large readership. More people read it now because of online. You know, we have a tremendous reach, so I'm just hoping to make people aware, like you're saying, to educate. I think what we can hope for the most is to educate people. I pitched a story in South America where I went to this gold mine that's 17,000 plus feet up in the Andes. Like the worst place I've ever been in my life. It's just really, really hardcore. And there I wrote that piece because no reporter would go. What made it so horrible? Well, one, it's at 17,400 feet, so you can't breathe. And 50,000 people living up there. There's no police, no government, no sanitation, so the streets are filled with feces, mercury, urine, mud. It's underage prostitution, guys stabbing themselves over them. It's dead wood at 17,000 feet. And it was amazing for pictures. It was just like, these guys are like digging into these mines. They're at the foot of a glacier, so people go digging into the glacier, and then the glacier shifts and traps them, and they get entombed in the glacier. And I heard about this story years ago, and then finally I pitched it to the paper, and they're just like, okay, go down there. So I did that, and I did another story on the Interoceanic Highway, and I made it 5 days up there. I couldn't last any longer. There's no heat. So when you get to the hotel room, they have about 20 blankets. So when you're sleeping, you're just like, oh, like you can't get up. You know, it's like time to wake up. You're like, oh, like you're bench pressing blankets to try to get out. And
you can't breathe no matter what you do.
yeah, no matter what you do, and all the hotels are in the red light district, so they're blasting 80s music, like super loud, you know, like Eye of the Tiger just blasting at 3 a.m. And it was a total nightmare. I couldn't sleep. I was delirious, and yeah, it's just the place was really, really amazing. Thank you very much for coming out and spending some of your time here.